Everyone, we got another episode of Survival Guide to Life. And this week we have a very interesting guest speaker for you. His name is Brendan, and he's from the YouTube channel MasterTalk. Now, he focuses in on helping people master their talk. So, just right off the bat, Brendan, what kind of sparked this drive or this desire? Like, I know you had college mates and they kind of told you like, hey, you should start a YouTube channel and stuff, but even before that, like, what like drove this public speaking and oral communication?
Of course, man. And do I pronounce your name as Omar or Amar?
It's
Sorry.
Amar.
Amar, gotcha,
Okay.
because I see kind of like two. So, okay, awesome. Yeah, so it's a great way to start the conversation, Amar. So the way that happened is before I did my competitions and before I ended up being the person I am today, my goal is pretty simple. Live a very regular life, get into business school, get a job as an accountant. I wasn't aspiring to be this YouTuber. I thought that was for rich kids or something. Like I didn't come from a lot of money. So I just, did my thing, and I realized when I got into business school, my love for these competitions. What happened essentially is a case competition is when a business gives you a problem. So let's say Nike comes up to you and says, "Hey, Amar, women aren't buying enough of our shoes. How do we get more women to buy Nike shoes?" So from that problem, we can then spend 3 hours figuring out a solution and then pitching that solution to a board of executives who are often from the actual company. But we are in our early 20s, right? So why would anyone put themselves through that? The reason is because much like getting onto a professional sports team, how you go to like a D1 school and you have to get drafted and you go through all that work. The same rule, though a lot less competitive, I would add, applies in the business sense. Everyone who does these competitions is always first in line to get the top jobs out of the university. So let's say you want to work at IBM, you want to work at McKinsey, you want to work at all these big companies. Going through these competitions is where it started. That's how my journey started. I did these competitions to get a job, but then eventually I became obsessed with them. Every day I was presenting or I was coaching somebody else. And without me even realizing it, at the end of my degree, I had presented 500 times. I had coached dozens of people on public speaking. And I was one of the youngest speech coaches in the world. I started coaching CEOs when I was 23 ish, around. And that's how MasterTalk came to be. So when those college students, back to your point, asked me, they were like, "Hey, Brendan, why don't you make like videos on this topic?" I was like, "Why would I ever do that? I have a great job waiting for me after school. Why would I ever make videos?" But after so many people asked me, I just went to research what was out there, and I realized why they were asking the question. Everything that was out there was terrible. You have advice like, "Hey, Amar, be yourself," or "Get up on stage. What's the harm?" or "Picture everyone in their underwear." And I just It's all nonsense. So I started making videos, thought it was a stupid idea, but then the YouTube channel started gaining traction, and here we are today.
Oh, that's great. So my next question is, from your own development, from where you started to where you are now, what was your mindset like in the beginning and where is it now? And like, how has it kind of shifted?
Yeah, for sure. So the way that I thought about the beginning, at the beginning of my university career, I didn't have a lot of money, right? So for me, it was just like I need to make money, right? I need to find a job, create cash flow. But then after I graduated university, it was like, okay, I have the money now. So what do I do? How do I make an impact in the world? And the big difference in the lesson that I have for people is the most important habit you could ever have in your life that nobody talks about. And the habit is ask yourself a hard question every day about life. Let me get you started. What are you pretending not to know? If you had all of the money in the world, how would you spend your time? And if you died tomorrow, what would your funeral speech say about you and what you stood for? The issue with most people, Amar, is they don't ask themselves the hard questions about life. Whereas with me, I'm not more important than people. I'm not more special. I'm sitting on a mattress right now. I'm not unique in any way. The difference though is I wrote my funeral speech at a very young age. I started asking myself these difficult questions about how life should be at a young at a very when I was like 17 or something. So what happened was I started to question life in ways most people don't until they're in their 30s. For example, here's the number one culprit. Why are we trying to get married, have two and a half kids, not two, has to be two and a half, and then we have to live in front of a white picket fence, not like any other color. We can't choose the color of the fence. It needs to be white. And then we're supposed to have two cars because if we have one, it's not good enough. We better have at least two children. All this stuff is all made up. Like somebody else invented this, and we have to do all of these things. And when we start questioning that conventional wisdom, another example is why are we retiring for 65 if Steve Jobs, who's a multi-billionaire, died at 56? He didn't even make it to retirement. So when we question all of these things, we start to go, hey, wait a minute. Nobody understands what the hell's going on. So we got to make our own rules.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right?
Yeah, it's completely true because it's all someone who said what is quote unquote the norm, but what really is normal.
I love that you said that. What is normal? Let's break that down for people. So this is what normal gets you, everyone. If you want to be normal, which is most people, you have a broken relationship. Kids don't like you if you have kids. You're unhealthy. You're always eating the wrong things. You're probably going to die without a purpose. You're probably going to die at a young age. You're going to be in debt, have so much credit card debt that you won't be able to handle. You don't know how to manage your money, and you have no clue how to pick passions and things you actually like to do relative to what everyone else wants you to do. Do you really want to be normal?
No,
Right? It's like, so
it's
yeah, that's the point.
definitely not something I want to be. So no, with just your friends or people you coached in school, like what did you notice was the most prevalent in or like the most thing that was weak in all their presentations?
Yeah, good question. So the big thing is what I developed later on that I called the puzzle method. So I'll give you that analogy. Public speaking is like a jigsaw puzzle. You know those puzzles where you have like 1,000 pieces, got to put them together, right? Are you familiar? You're familiar,
Yeah.
right? Jigsaw puzzle. So if I asked you, Amar, let's say you were doing a puzzle with me or somebody else, which pieces would you start with first and why?
It would depend on me looking at the picture and seeing where like the hardest part is, and then go for the easy part and then start with that.
Right. So building on that in a puzzle, there's usually an easier part to every puzzle. Which part do you think it is?
The corners.
Exactly. You're right. Yeah, the corners, right? Because they always have an edge next to them, so they're a lot easier to build. So now the question we need to ask ourselves is why don't we apply the same logic in public speaking? We have a presentation in 2 days. So what do? We start with the middle pieces first. We shove a bunch of content, and then it's Friday, and then we present, and then we get to our last slide and we go, yeah, so thanks. And then the presentation ends. Kind of like a great movie with a bad ending. Game of Thrones, right? Like TV series. Same thing, right? So the puzzle method is a different way of practicing that yields much better results. What you want to do, you present the introduction 100 times, not 5 times, not 10 times, 100 times, and that won't take you that long because your introduction's a minute long, right? So it's going to take you 2 hours maybe. Then your introduction's perfect. Then go to the conclusion, and then do the same thing 100 times. Start with the edges first. Do the corner pieces, and then you'll realize that wow, I'm actually a really good speaker, like because I did the intro and it's perfect. So now with that confidence, then you tackle the middle. That was the way I coached the people in university. And that's how I coach clients today. But the idea is if you start with the easy ones first and you go, public speaking is actually really easy. When that mindset shifts, you never go back.
Yeah, no. So with that, it's just I feel like public speaking is different, and just recording is different. Like I always find it weird when you're talking and then like you got your headphones and you're just listening to yourself, and it's like I'm waiting for myself to finish the sentence before I can start talking.
Right. Yeah, and you mean that in the context of presentations, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it is odd. And the way that I think about this is the key is not just applying that method, but presenting that same presentation over and over again. Because most people, what they do, let's say, you have a school presentation or you have a work presentation, you usually only give it once. Like you have the project update, you have the school project, and then you move on, right? Like that's
yeah,
how it's been most of the time. But that's not what the best speakers in the world do. The best speakers in the world present the same thing hundreds of times. Tony Robbins is the best example. He hasn't changed his seminars in
yeah. That's
30
true.
years, right? So imagine, like, I always like to give this context in a show. So let's say you go to a Tony Robbins seminar, he comes up to you and he goes, Amar, man, I've been doing this mindset thing for 35 years and I'm tired of it. You want to talk about porcupines this weekend? You're going to say no. You're going to say no, Tony. I spent $2,000 to be here. I want you to talk about mindset. I want you to tell me the same thing that you told everyone else. That's why I'm paying you money to be here, right? We don't frown upon the same topic. We actually expect it. We want you to present the same thing because we want the same benefit as everyone else got, right? So that's why he doesn't change his topic. Whereas most of us, who are average, don't do that, right? We always change the topic. Go, let me talk about golf this week. Then let me talk about Eagles. No wonder we're not getting any better. And let me give you a bonus tip since I'm on the show. For you, the presentation is your podcast. What's the mission of the podcast? What are you trying to achieve with it? How are you going to create the ultimate survival guide for life? That's the mission. And the best part is you never have to change the presentation. The podcast isn't going to change tomorrow. It's the same mission, right? So when you do that 100 times, the first time you're like, yeah, hey guys, it's Amara, grind, hustle, execution. We talk about the survival guide. But after the 100th time, you're like, I remember when I was 15 years old. Anyways, you get what I'm saying. You do the same thing. And this applies for everybody, not just you and me, because we're content creators. You're Julia, you work at a bank outside of work. Well, you like running marathons. So to Julia, that doesn't seem like a big deal. But to me, it's like, make a presentation around that. Teach other people how to prepare for marathons. All it takes is for one person to go, hey, Julia, you really helped me out. I went for a run this morning. Thank you so much for what you do. And that's it. Julia's hooked to public speaking. She's like, I got to present this to 30 people, not just 3 people. And then she'll get much better at communication. So that same analogy applies for everybody.
Okay, it's a different approach, but one that is strategic because I kind of got led in the wrong way, I would say, kind of with Gary Vee, and he's like, like if you don't have a podcast, you don't have a video, just go create it. You don't know what to make, just get in front of the camera and just do it.
Let me add there because I'm a huge Gary Vee fan. So I actually think those two advices actually stay in the same. So let's kind of tie this to make it simple. At the beginning, you absolutely want to create something. Gary Vee's absolutely right there. And the reason is because if you don't do anything, you're not going to find out what you want to do or anything. But as you get better and you start transitioning to becoming a professional, because once you find your topic, obviously, which you have, it seems, when you get into that one area of focus, then you start to specialize and then you focus all your attention on that one topic. So the point to Gary's advice, so people understand, is it depends where you're at. He doesn't look at the influencers. He doesn't go to Kevin Hart and go, "Hey, you got to try different stuff, man. You got to create different things." No, he doesn't give Kevin Hart advice. He's giving advice to the person who isn't taking action, right? So we always have to understand the context. Something to clarify. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And like I didn't really create anything, so I was just like, you know what, let me just do it. And then I think sort of getting towards the middle, I should have had more in depth like practices or just presenting more.
Right. And question for you, Amar. If you compare the first episode of this podcast to where you are now, what's your communication skill? How have your communication skills improved out of 10?
Oh, they like a 5.
5?
No, like if I'm gonna be like it's been like 10, but I still think that it could improve.
Absolutely. And that rule applies to me, but relative to where you started.
Yeah, a lot better.
Yeah, it's like 11, right? You just went, whoa, it's like a 12. That's what I mean.
So then you say you start coaching as work as well. Now my next question is, do you consult or you more so just working on speech alone?
Yeah, you got it. So at the beginning, I never wanted to make MasterTalk a business. It was really just, people like you, people who have ideas worth sharing. I just wanted to be the bridge. Like, watch my free stuff, be happy, get better at communication. But what happened over time, because of I guess, the quality of the content, I ended up building a coaching practice out of it because a lot of people started reaching out to me and they're like, hey, do you like do coaching and stuff? So yeah, I do coach mostly executives, purpose driven entrepreneurs, podcasts. Like, people who are doing big things in life, those are usually my clients, and those people's kids. That's
Uh,
mostly what I do usually.
So yeah, no, because as my profession, I'm more in just marketing and digital side. So like, say if a company needs to gain brand awareness or build a social presence and like gain a sales funnel and lead generation, so that's more so what I do. And I like that you do that because I think that's a very big weak link in almost any entrepreneur or almost any CEO, is that they're so focused on delegating, or trying to like move in from the next thing to the next thing. They sort of overlook public speaking and your the way you present yourself and your demeanor matters, because how are you gonna gain more clients or have the client in front of you take you more seriously?
I completely agree with you. Right. Like, I think one of the main reasons I started MasterTalk was for the next Elon Musk. So right now, the current Elon Musk, when he was 12, I wasn't born, so he didn't have access to me. But now the next Elon Musk, who's currently 12 right now, well, hopefully he finds out that I exist, so he can learn how to communicate before he gets too busy not to focus on it anymore. That's the hope, anyways.
So, just with that, and Master Talk, do you have any other aspects or any other ways like doing like speech development? Have you ever thought about like speech pathology?
Yeah, speech pathology is actually something I learned about 6 months ago. So even before I started the channel, I had no idea what a speech pathologist is. So for those who don't know, what that is essentially is somebody who fixes the way that you speak, but mostly in the pronunciation and enunciation side. So let's say you got into an accident, right? And you need to recover your speech, or you want to learn how to remove your accent. That's what pathologists do. So I probably won't do it as a career because it doesn't excite me as much, but I learn a lot from them. So, for example, and this is still something I'm still researching, like, how do I apply those techniques into my videos so that people can learn and use them at home? But yeah, mostly what I do on that area is I talk about karaoke. Like, a lot of, I know this is weird, but not many people know this, but I can karaoke in 8 different languages. But I speak three. So I speak three, but I can karaoke in eight. And karaoke in other languages that you don't know allows you to pronounce your words better in general. So that's one of the keys that I recommend people. Because if you're just pronouncing words every day without a coach, and you're just going, I like apples, I like oranges, you'll get bored after 3 days. Like, you won't do it anymore. So I like singing in different languages. I'm not a good singer, just for the record. It just helps. It's just
Uh,
fun.
that's a good point you made, because I noticed like even with when I was learning Arabic, like having to speak that and like pronounce that, like every letter. is like on like different, like the way we were learned it was like uh this letter is when you take the tip of your tongue and touch the lateral incisors of your teeth, and this one is like, so it's like each like part of the teeth and like a part of the tongue, and like the way it's pronounced, like if you just pronounce one thing that kind of sounds like the other, it like you could either say heart or you could say dog. So it's like, hey girl, I gave you my dog, and you're just like, wait, what?
You're like, wait, what dog? What happened?
It's like, why do you have a dog? And I
I'm a
didn't know about it sooner. So say I came up to you, for coaching, and how would you start your, evaluation?
right. So it's not really an evaluation. It's not a test.
I know, but like, you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. So
what do I need to work? Like,
right. So I'll kind of give the structure so people can do this at home. But usually, how what I do with people I coach is the first thing I do is I make them pick a topic that they love. So for you, it would be your podcast. So let's say we were having a coaching session right now. I would force you to make a 5 minute presentation on your podcast, and then in 3 weeks, what I would do is week one we would only focus on the introduction. So I'd make you present a 60-second introduction to present your podcast. So you might start by saying something like, "Hey guys, my name is Amar. I'm gonna talk to you today about survival life guide." And then I'm just like, "Wait, what?" And then I'm going to correct you in that. And then, but what I'm going to do differently, people need to pay attention to this, is I don't change the topic. So I keep it on the same topic and the same words, and then I change the words and I change the way that you speak. So I go, for example, let's say you say, "Hey Amar, my whatever." I say, "Okay, cut that. Get into something else. Talk about something else." And then by doing this together 25, 30 times over and over and over again, well then you sound a lot more cleaner. And then that gives you a huge confidence boost because you're like, "Wow, I'm so great at speaking." And the rest is easy. Then after I just do the conclusion, you're like, "Well, I got the intro right. How can I not get the conclusion right?" Same thing. Tweak, 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 tweak. And then this week, then the week after, content, 3 minutes in the middle, explain the podcast to us. And then I make you present the full five, and then I give you feedback on all of it. And then after 4 weeks, you're this incredible speaker that can explain a podcast in 5 minutes better than anyone else can.
so
That's
that's
how I
all.
would do it.
4 weeks.
Sorry?
4 weeks.
Yeah, something like that. 4 weeks. The whole program's 12, but that's what I would do in 3 weeks, and then the
So
other 8 weeks is other stuff.
now with like COVID and everything, have you like transitioned into like virtual coaching?
Yeah, so I think for me, COVID, the biggest issue for me, anyways, was not really the coaching. Because I was already coaching people virtually, because a lot of my clients are in the US and I'm based in Canada. But the speaking engagements, that's what really changed, right? Because obviously, as you probably know, in-person events aren't a thing right now. So I woke up to a lot of cancellations. I just woke all of them. So I just went, okay. So what I had to do instead is pivot to virtual events, give the same keynotes with the same energy, with the same enthusiasm, but in my basement, right? So how do you do that? All right. So the idea is you need to understand that online presentations are more challenging, and the reason they're more challenging is because you can't gauge how the person's reacting to you. So let's say we're all in person, and I'm giving you and your team a workshop or something. I don't know, your family, whatever. And I say a joke. Two things will happen. One, you'll either laugh at the joke and say, "Man, this Brendan guy, super funny, love it." Or two, which is more likely, you're going to look at me and go, "This dude is not funny. Why is he saying jokes? It's just not something you should be doing." But either way, I can gauge my audience's reaction and go, "Okay, Amar doesn't find me funny, and so doesn't his family. So let me adapt my presentation." I don't get to do that online. Because online, even in this conversation, it's one on one now. I have no clue how you're reacting to me, Amar, because I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at the camera lens, right? So because I'm looking at the camera lens, I don't actually see you or what you're saying or doing. But if you're on a Zoom call with 25 people, little screens, you can't see how anybody's reacting to you. So the joke that I told you in person, I need to say with the same energy, the same enthusiasm, the same positivity, and assume it's funny. And that is the challenge of the online world. So the way that you overcome this, and the way I did it, is you get a bunch of people on a Zoom call, people you don't like, people who are critical, to yell at you, to go, your audio is off, the way that you're dressed is off, your clothing is wrong, your hair is wrong, the way that you speak is wrong, so that you're better prepared for the real thing. And the other part is the mindset piece, is assume that your audience is here to listen to you. So at the beginning, when I started podcasting, when I was on my first show, it was really weird because I was like, why is a stranger asking me questions about my life? This is so bizarre. But then over time, you get used to it. You kind of just say, well, I don't know Amar, but Amar's probably a nice guy. Look at him. He's got a nice background here. He's trying to help people, help them with the challenge in their life. So I'm going to assume that Amar's a great guy, which means I'm going to assume that I've known him for 3 years, that I've known him for a long time. And by doing that, it allows me to show up fully. And this is a mindset shift. But as you get more and more positive feedback, like every podcast or every presentation goes, Brendan, that was great. Over time, that belief eventually becomes true.
No, yeah, you're right. That's with like almost anything. Brian Tracy, he wrote this book, Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life, and it's like you gotta have that, and then it's one thing to say it, but you gotta say it so many times that eventually it's engraved in your head, and then you just believe it. So,
Absolutely.
do you, what kind of caught my attention was when you're doing a live presentation, say you'll catch them and you'll notice if they laugh or not, and then that's when you know you have to change your speech, so to say. Like what comes in your mind, and how are you able to delegate where you need to change the speech, and gauge what's your gauge in figuring this out?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, that's very tricky for most people to do. You need to be like a top 5 or 10% speaker to get to that point. Because remember, I've presented hundreds of times, right? At the beginning, I sucked, right? I wasn't able to tell. So my advice to people, to keep things simple for today, is I would start by presenting the same thing 25 times. 99% of people listening have not done that. You've done that because you've done multiple episodes and it's always the same format, right? The format isn't going to change. See, so at episode 10, you kind of just go, well, why am I sitting in my basement? Why don't I create this Zoom thing where I kind of look all cool? Oh, my mic sucks. Why don't I buy something better? Nobody's doing that, Amar. Like they're always presenting the same thing. No, they're always presenting different presentations all the time. That's the first thing. Second thing is have more conversations with your audience. The secret to my success in public speaking is I'm not more special. I don't think about my audience. I talk to them. I engage with them. Nobody has had more conversations about public speaking than I have in the entire industry with 8 year olds. Nobody.
With what?
With 8 year olds.
Oh,
Like most speech coaches are in their 40s, 50s, 60s. They don't talk to 8 year olds. I've talked to a lot of them. My youngest client, my most successful one, is 6, right? And she's an incredible speaker. I'll send you the video after if you want to see it. But anyways, she's amazing. But the biggest lesson I learned from them is I would present. I would think I'm super clear. Like to you, I would be super clear. And then at the end, they would look at me and go, what's a CEO? And I go, right. Right. What is a CEO? I have no clue. I have to simplify that. But because I have these conversations over time, that allows me to adapt in real time. So when I'm in a real presentation, in like while I'm presenting, I can quickly adapt, especially if it's a workshop, because I'm so used to having conversations with my audience. Whereas most speakers, what they do is they're scared. They get to on stage, they present, then they run away. They run away. They go, "Where's Amar?" No, I'm kidding, not you, but somebody else, right? They run away. Whereas what the best speakers in the world do, and this is true with Tony Robbins, Gary Vee, the two examples you mentioned, and that I mentioned, really think about, watch their vlogs. They're not running away after their presentations. Even if Gary has a flight in 2 hours, He stays for 47 minutes to talk to as many people as he signs as many books. And then when it's impossible for him to stay, that's when he bolts for the flight. He doesn't have to do that, right? He gets paid 150 grand per speech. He doesn't need to do that. Those people will not add value to his life. He has a net worth of $200 million. He doesn't care, but for the money, anyways. But the reason he stays, he's always talking. He's always listening to his audience. He's always trying to engage with them, even at a point in his life where it literally adds no value, honestly. But that's the point that I'm driving. If you can get to that level, that's when you can get into the 1% of the communicators in the world.
Okay. Now that's a different
Right.
insight.
Let me ask you, kind of like, let's make this kind of a coaching. How many people who are listening to this podcast have you had one-on-one 1 hour conversations with?
It's like maybe 3 or 4.
Exactly. You need to make that 30. That's the key.
Okay,
that make sense?
makes sense.
Right, there you go.
Yeah, so how much do I owe you? No, just,
Don't worry, man. The platform is more than enough. I'm always happy to share.
you said you were in Canada. Just out of curiosity, what part of Canada are you in?
I'm based in Montreal.
Montreal. Okay. So, did you learn to speak French from a young age?
Good.
And have you ever done any public speaking in just French?
That's a very sharp, specific question. I love it. That's actually why I'm so passionate about public speaking, because I sucked most of my life. So for those who don't know, Montreal is one of the few cities in the world where most people who live in the city are bilingual or trilingual. Very little people in Montreal only speak one language. Most people speak two or three. So because I was born and raised in Montreal, so I knew English, as you can probably tell, but I didn't know French because my parents weren't francophones. So they looked at me and they said, "Hey, buddy, you got to learn the language. So we're going to put you in a French education system." So that ended up being hugely beneficial to me because now obviously I'm fluent in French. But the issue was all of the presentations I gave in my whole life. Not only was I uncomfortable with them, I had to give them in a language I didn't know. So when I was in grade 1 and I looked at the audience, I was like, bonjour? Like I just didn't know how to speak French. So I didn't like public speaking for most of my life. But to your point, now that I know the language, I do keynote in French as well.
Okay. Now, is it a different strategy, or do you use the same type of mentality, or you have to like use different values in different languages?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad we're having this conversation because I know a lot of people listening are presenting English as a second language. So I think it's great to have. What we need to understand, okay, the difference between presenting in your first language and your second is not intelligence. People like look and they go, "Oh, I don't know how to speak English. It's because I'm dumb. It's because I'm not good enough." That's wrong. Okay, it's just not true. The difference is vocabulary. The issue with your second language is not that you don't know what you're talking about. The issue is that you don't understand the cultural context of that language. So let's say, in my case, my first language, well, actually, my first language is Tamil, technically. Well, let's just go with English for simplicity. So, English, I know what break a leg means, right? Break a leg, means good luck. But in French, you can't translate that because it actually means what I'm saying, like, which is casser ton, casser tes pieds, which is basically break your leg literally. So it means completely different things. Same thing if your first language is Spanish, not you, but somebody who's listening, and you have a quote that you love in Spanish, it doesn't translate that well in English. That's the issue. So how do you fix this? It's actually a lot easier than you think. You write your pitch, you write your presentation in your first language. If your first language is Hindi, if your first language is Mandarin, you do it in that language because you understand what the cultural context of that language is and you know exactly what you want to say. Number two, translate that language into the language you need to speak in it. So translate your presentation in the language you want to speak in it. So if you need to speak it in English, translate in English. Number three, most important part, the vocabulary test. Present to people whose native language is the one you want to speak it in. So let's say my first language is English, second language is French. I write it in English. That's my first language. Translate it in French. And then I present that presentation to people whose first language is French. So when they look at me, they can go, Brendan, when you say this word, it's actually not right. You can't say it like this. So one example, I know people won't understand, but it'll make it simple. Like eye contact, right? In French, it's pronounced as contact oculaire, but I kept saying the word literally. Like I kept saying contact de l'œil, which is eye contact, but it doesn't work at all in French. So the people are looking at me like I'm retarded. They're like, "Why do you keep saying that? It doesn't make any sense." But now I know, right? But they do that with every word, and that's how you pass the vocabulary test. So now that you know the word, then you're going to be much more comfortable presenting in your second language. That's it.
No,
But the
yeah,
issue is you do it with the same presentation though. If you keep changing presentations, you're not going to get any better.
yeah. No, that's a good view because it's kind of funny because one of my Pakistani friends, he was like trying to teach me a little Urdu, and then I was like, oh, okay. He's like, what's up? I'm like, I'm eating. He's like, what are you eating? I'm like, garam kutta. He's like, what the hell? You can't say it like that. I'm like, isn't that a hot dog? He's like, no, that literally means a hot dog.
Right. That's like, I
So
agree.
that makes sense. And now with what's going on now and like everyone having to pivot, like yesterday I was talking to this girl. She started off like in acting, and then she started doing producing and was doing Facebook live for like food TV's shows, and then now she's in like book coaching and coaching people for books. And like I see it as like you may start one way, but then you go wherever the economy and society takes you. And just with that being said, you kind of like give like you let your not your desire but your passions like rest for something that you're trying to gain financially, or do you let your passions override your financial desire?
Good question. I think passions are stupid. Not many people are going to talk about this, so I will. Passions are a waste of time. Okay? And for those who are listening that have passions, this advice does not apply to you. Okay? This is for most of us who don't know what the passion is. Let's dig into this. You could be passionate about anything, Amar. Your car, your family, your friends, your hot dog, right? Everything. You can be passionate about anything. You can't build anything around that. So, what's the solution? I am a big proponent of decisions over passions. Decisions are specific. You have to take an action, you have to do something, and that's what leads to the passion if you make enough decisions. I'm the best example here. The question you should never ask yourself is, what are you passionate about? It will lead you into a rabbit hole of wasting time. The better question to ask yourself is, what does the world need you most to do right now and why? When I was 12 years old, Amar, the answer to that question was not being a YouTuber on public speaking. It was to make money, get a job as an accountant. My parents are making minimum wage. Let's figure out a way to fix that. I thought YouTube was for rich people. This is not something that I would do. So I studied really hard. I was really good at mathematics because that's what the world needed me to do. I was really strong at math, really bad at everything else. Worked really hard, got a job at one of the top accounting firms in the world. And then I asked myself the same question again. What does the world need you most to do right now and why? And then I realized I didn't like accounting, but I was much better in technology consulting because I was doing all of these competitions, right? I was presenting to all these executives like, I want to do that for a living. That sounds amazing. Once again, not a YouTuber. I want to be working at IBM as a consultant. So I worked again. 8 months, prepared my interviews, did the whole application process. By some fortune, I got a job at IBM. And then, which I guess from your South Asian background is like a huge win, right? Because your parents know what IBM is. They're like, wow, like, what is this? He's like working at IBM. So then after that, I kind of just said, okay, what does the world? Once again, at this point in the conversation, I'm a pretty normal guy. Like, there's no Lots of people work at IBM. It's not like a special thing. But then I asked myself the question for the third time: what does the world need you most to do, and why? And that's what led to Master Talk. Why is this important? The story is important to tell you because if I never made the decision to be an accountant, I never would have made the decision to be a consultant, which means I wouldn't even have the expertise to even do Master Talk. If I never made the decisions, I wouldn't be here. We wouldn't even be having this conversation. And the issue with most people is they don't make a decision at all, right? They don't make a single decision. They kind of hope that the passion is just going to come out of the sky. It's just going to land on you with like a roti or something next to it. And like, that's it. Like, no, that's not how the world works, people. Most people don't have passions. Your goal is to figure out the next move and to make the next move. You have a limited amount of time that you're alive, and you can only make a certain amount of moves on the board. Make sure you're using the moves, because if you're not moving at all, you're never going to get there. Colonel Sanders started KFC in like his 60s or something like that, right? It's the series of life experiences that lead to that passion. But if you don't do anything, you just lose.
And you just stay stagnant.
Right. Like if you don't know what your passion is, just learn from as many people as you can. Learn from people like us, learn from Gary Vee, learn from those people, and ask yourself, why do you admire the people that you do? And get really, really focused, and then you'll find your truth.
Now, I thought this was also interesting and a little coincidence, like just something made me ask, like what was your nationality? Like I was born here in America too. You were born in Canada. I was like, are you from Sri Lanka? And you said yes. Now, do many people do you get like when you like, oh, I'm from there, they're like, where is that? Or like they confuse you and like they assume something else.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm sure you have this too. You get confused with being in India or Sri Lanka. But honestly, the way I live life is we're all one humanity at the end of
No,
the day.
no,
I don't
I
really.
just like I think it's important because like we are all one humanity and stuff, but like how back in the day when we were like cavemen, you had the hunters, you had the gatherers and certain things. And even though we're all the same and we come from the earth and we go to the earth, we all have blood in us. I think that each and every ethnicity or nationality has like a uniqueness about them, and then when they all coincide, that's when everyone can really learn from each other and like blend and like benefit. And that's what I wanted to like kind of iterate. And like you
Right.
notice that like certain areas you'll have like people who are like just kind of specialized or kind of like good in certain things because of their adaptation or like trying to survive in their environment, so to say.
No, I agree, and I think that's a very good perspective to have. I think the way I just look at it is I don't waste too much mental energy to correct people. You know what I mean? Like I don't see the point of doing
Oh,
that.
okay,
Like
yeah,
if
yeah, I agree with
that's
you.
what I.
Like,
But I see your point. Like if somebody comes up to me and I say I'm like I don't say I'm Indian. Like I say I'm Sri Lankan. They go, oh yeah, like, and then we have a conversation. That's totally fine with me. I think it's more just about like I just think the reason why I'm so lenient is
yeah,
I think the issue with today's society, and you could probably agree with me on this, it's like Democrats don't understand that Republicans have the same passions that they do, the same love for family. They still watch Netflix at the end of the same thing if you're a Republican. They don't understand that Democrats are eating the same hamburgers as they are passionate about the same things. We're and I'm not saying you're doing this, it's more of a comment in general, by the way, just we're on the same page. Is this whole idea of like we're trying too hard to find holes in each other's logic
yeah,
instead of doing what you're saying that we should do, which I agree with completely, which just saying, okay, let's just try and understand each other as much as possible. And if there's miscommunication along the way, let's table it. Let's just go, okay, like that's okay. And let's just explain it differently instead of just going, hey, bro, like I'm Sri Lankan, okay, right?
like like okay, yeah, no, I that makes sense.
Right.
No, more so like just even with that, like you can take it one step further, and then you have like people who want to say like, oh, let's the three things I never like to talk about is politics, religion, and finance.
Same.
But there's certain people, like you'll be somewhere and they'll just break that barrier, and then what is your sort of uh strategy, or like how do you just keep your composure in like dealing with, you could say, ignorant or arrogant, or people who are just trying to press your buttons, just like, okay, let's just like, I'm just waiting for him to like snap.
Yeah, I don't talk to people like that.
No, I know, even
Right.
if you don't try to talk to them, they'll find you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah. 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 I mean, there's haters everywhere. I think the key is to always keep in mind your own mortality. Right. If you know you're going to die in 40 years. Okay. Let me kind of play this differently. Okay. Let's say we both live for 50 more years. Okay. Let's assume. Let's assume we live longer. Let's hope. Let's assume 50 for this example. And you get to meet one new person every day. Okay. Let's say that's 300 people a year, just to keep things simple. I know there's 365 days, but let's keep it simple. So if you do 50 years times 300 people, the answer is 15,000. Okay. So the question you need to ask yourself, when you think of it like that, is out of the billions of people on Earth, who do you want those 15,000 people to be? Like the people that you're going to meet.
Beneficial people.
Right. Right. You don't want those people to be negative and stuff. And once you talk to as many people as I have, and you'll get there, well, those 15,000 spots fill up really fast, right? Because after you meet like 100 really smart people, you don't need to go cold networking. You talk to those 100 people and you go connect me to all your buddies, and that's it. You're done, right? That's your network. So my advice for people is, for the purposes, for the goals that you have, for the discussions you want to have, you need to actively seek out the people that you want to have those conversations with. Like, I would never give an hour of my time if somebody just wanted to pick my brain. But if it was, hey, I have this podcast, I want to share this message out with 50 to 100 people, that makes a lot more sense to me, right? Because it's not just for one person anymore, it's for the 25 people who are listening, or whoever is listening, right? So it's always about, based on what your goals are, you make the right decisions for how you want to allocate your time to maximize the outcomes of your goals and your life and your happiness.
Okay. Now, with that being said, usually when we get towards the end, I always have the guests end on a quote, and it may be something that's been resonating in their mind or their heart, or that's kind of been coming up more recently than like kind of late, like later in their life.
Yes, there's a lot of quotes I can share, but I'll show you the one that I partially take credit on. And it's the following, especially if you made it 50 minutes into this conversation, you're still listening. And the quote is as follows: be insane or be the same. If you want to be like everyone else, that's totally fine. But if you made it this far, you probably want to do something great with your life. You probably want to do something different. So there's one way to do that. It's to learn the art of insanity. Don't you find it odd that a 22-year-old kid started a YouTube channel not on pranks or vlogs or comedy skits, but on public speaking and communication information for the world, and then a year later started coaching CEOs of companies, but at the same time, Amar, lives in his parents' basement, is sitting on a mattress as he's talking to you right now, doesn't own a car, doesn't plan on moving out of his mother's basement until he's 30, karaoke's in 8 different languages, dances alone for an hour a day, and loves Justin Bieber. How do any of those decisions make any sense at all, Amar? Brendan, you're a grown man. You're 24 years old. You should move out of your parents' house. You should live your own life. And that's the point, everyone. When all of the decisions that you make sense to the only person that matters, which is you, you're probably making the right decisions.
That's a wonderful quote, and very eloquently said. Uh, Thank you for your time, and then maybe we can have you on here another episode, and you could see the difference in my talk, and hopefully then I've mastered it.
Really appreciate it, Amar. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. I'll be in touch.
Of course.